Whereas today, with the advent of a software electric environment,
all of these things, it seems to me, profoundly relate to the rosary and to the church and the mystical body.
I'm doing a book called The Second God.
Yeah. Is there any relation to the first one?
Well, I was quite interested in the phrase, God is dead. If you, again, using the simple formula off the back rearview mirror, obviously the Newtonian God.
But are there any guys here that believe in God?
Now, these are one-liners.
And distraction. Now, a child learns to separate his senses when he learns to read. When he learns to read silently, without even the lips moving. And his legs will twist, he bites down, and he grabs that pencil, but by an incredible tour de force, he learns the most remarkable thing. Not classroom discipline, but he learns how to separate one sense from another. He learns how to turn on one sense and keep the others in neutral. So that he can see, but not use the other senses. His stuff is too departmentally SOBs and ran the place. Was that the academic world is deeply rooted in faith and the bias of print. And the absolute insistence that only the grammar and the basic assumptions of print are acceptable. Only these forms can give you truth. The one possible exception that they will admit to is mathematics. But they cut the physical scientists off to the side as sort of older and unlettered technicians. But the notion that there might be other languages, other roads to truth, other ways to enter being and reality, they just will not conceive. Now, speech.
But a comedian puts on your ignorance. Until you've heard his jokes, you don't even know what you're mad at. He tells you where your grievances are. That is what jokes are. They're an inventory of grievance. Well, to let it blow like that and so on is part of the act. The British Empire is the empire in which the sun never sets because you cannot trust an Englishman in the dark.
Not like, well, I believe there's something. I mean, in like an organized religion, like Christian, Muslim, Jewish.
Quantum mechanics, 1900, Max Planck pulled out all the connections in matter and gave us quantum theory. Quantum theory is simply physics minus the connections. And it's quite easily understood, even by scientists. But don't think they don't have their troubles, because one of the problems of Western visual man is that he tries to translate everything into visual terms.
That the Psalms, belonging to a totally alien tradition of non-written kind, do not belong in the corpus of rabbinical tradition. Now, you can imagine that to the incarnate Word speaking directly, that this kind of mentality.
Well, it's beautiful today. I mean, if you take someone who just refuses to go through the whole it is written theory, and he works at IBM or some company like that, he's in the same jeopardy. If you do it in the academic world, suppose you walked into court and tried to give your free-swinging, loose-hanging sort of I say to you thing.
Our Lord never ceased to lambaste the scribes and the Pharisees in his own time as being men of the letter, like lawyers.
Yeah.
It says here, and he is fond of telling them it is written, but I say unto you.
Yeah. Right. Well, you're facing it. The threat that you are to these academic types who are only worried about whether it's written or not. Can we take a minute out to have a little cup of Java? Have you heard Stan Freberg's commercials for the religion, Presbyterian Church?
No.
He does it in his regular old Stan Freberg style. He's got this guy coming on. I said, did you hear he's dead? He's dead. said, the God is dead sort of thing. Said, well, how do you know? He says, everybody says so. He says, a couple of professors at Yale.
About how many times a week would you say?
Well, 1.5 times a week.
Do you have her up, or you go to her place? Or?
No, most of the time she prefers to visit so she can see the grandchildren.
Did you get along with your wife?
Oh, yes, extremely well.
But they miss you constantly. Jewish mothers.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in... no, look.
No, please, no.
George,
Just let me ask these few questions, because we see week after week we're here, and we don't know anything about you.
Well,
You're asking us as if you don't have a Jewish mother.
No, I do.
All right,
and
well,
I confess it with great pride.
What do you give her, David? How much a month? Enough to get by. I mean, I won't be embarrassed, but enough so that... Is she happy with what you did?
Did you...
Thrilled.
Look, David, as a retailer, and I'm sure the rest of the panel will back me up on this, if the right person or movie or magazine were to say, hey, it's cool or it's hip to wear the cowboy boots, to wear the moccasins, to wear the socks, whatever, you're going to see moccasin boutiques going up everywhere, and franchises everywhere.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Could, though, a moccasin franchise be run by a woman? Whether it's self-help techniques like EST or the energy crisis, we cover everything on The David Susskind Show.
The guy on the Susskind Show, everybody, he's dead. But Stan has been doing this kind of thing for a couple of years.
Well, that dead theme is irrelevant. When Newton created God, the great clockmaker, managing the mechanism of the universe, everybody felt comfy, things were in order.
Yeah.
But with the disappearance of Newtonian physics and the disappearance of mechanical clockwork, well, God is dead. That's all there's to it. He's gone. He isn't up there anymore.
Yeah. There's no clock, therefore there's no...
It's like Bucky's current article about astroarchitecture. When you put a satellite around the Earth, you put a Bucky-Fuller dome around the planet. The planet has become a bubble.
Yeah.
People used to talk about life being a bubble. Now the planet is a bubble, incidentally, that could explode any minute, according to modern physics. They've only got to press the wrong experimental button in the laboratory and the whole thing disappears into...
The telephone network surrounds the whole community. It's service. It's nothing but service.
Yeah, but at what cost?
Exactly. It's the community cost. But it is community.
Yeah, I see what you mean, but it's very difficult.
Even if they drop a bomb on you, will still own the whole. This is an ad, a real estate ad in L.A. Times. Even if they drop a bomb on it, you will still own the whole. Isn't that a wonderful ad? That's figure ground, and that is hot cool. That's hot cool. Oh boy.
Yeah, that's really
when
cool.
the dust settles, it will go up in price. It's the rest of the ad. No,
ridiculous.
That is a great ad, Dr. Hot and Cool. I mean, that is a wonderful quote to put ahead of the chapter.
Yeah.
The real estate ad, I'd make the epigraph. Epigraph. Real estate ad for you will still own the whole. When the dust settles, it will go up in price. It will go up in smoke. Oh, yes. I have another Babe Ruth item on baseball in folder.
Got to press the wrong experimental button in the laboratory and the whole thing disappears into nothing. If you move all the particles that form the planet together, in current physical experiments, it's possible that somebody might make a slip and cause a total dissolution of matter. At the present moment, if all the particles that constitute the planet were to be put face to face, instead of having their usual spaces between them, they wouldn't constitute anything larger than the head of a pin.
Yeah, we got all that empty space around.
The inner spaces are enormously greater than outer space.
Yeah.
And it's typical of the naked ape that he hurtles toward the moon, carrying pictures of his wife and children in his wallet, in his hip pocket. This is a wonderful example of our irrelevance. The NASA venture, speaking of...
Well, when I was a student, when I was at college.
I never soak into it because the idea is to keep you aware of the fact.
It's a rather luminous phrase, or Marischal.
1939.
Visual space and literacy and scriptural religion. NASA, a bunch of highly endowed modern physicists, are totally under the domination of Gutenberg without knowing it. They think space is visual.
Yeah.
They think space is something out there.
Weren't you the first one to urinate on the moon? I was reading.
Yes, that's right.
Well, how about the old Russian who went up in the satellite and came back and said, "Hey boys, God isn't up here. I just toured the neighborhood and didn't find him."
You remember when the American got out of the satellite for the first time, the Russians laughed. They said, "We put the John inside from the first."
It is very difficult for a Western man to take things except in a visual, connected, rational mode. Modern physicists report all their findings in Newtonian terms, which are the old-fashioned visual language.
Nonlinear Ken Burns isn't exactly...
Wonderful world. It created civilization.
A long time ago.
It was a wonderful world.
If you don't believe me, let me ask you a question.
It created civilization in our sense. It didn't create...
It created a tremendous world.
There are lots of things better than civilization, but if you like civilization, that's the end of it.
What year is it?
It was never was seen before in any culture. And it's finished.
No.
Why? Because it has been circuited, surpassed, included in a new culture of software, information, or electric simultaneity, which the computer people call software. And this is a world where you have multi-billion-dollar environment of service images, vast affluence, available to children standing up in their playpens watching TV.
Longer live in an age of phonetic alphabet or of Euclidean geometry.
This
visual space is
May I speak on that? There's a rather interesting thing in relation to this. In 1400 BC, on the island of Knossos, there was invented the first phonetic alphabet. It was very primitive, but nevertheless it did have phonetic symbols in it. Now, Knossos is very close to Egypt. At the same time in Egypt, there was reigning a pharaoh named Akhenaten. And he was the first
wonderful world
pharaoh in Egypt to sponsor illustrative painting.
Civilization. It was a wonderful world.
And I found this at the time extremely interesting because I wanted to find out, being convinced that there is a definite parallel between the development of phonetic writing and verisimilitude or visual reality in paintings. As soon as I encountered these things, as soon as I encounter either one or the other, I want to find it.
Oh, these guys are very superficial. They're little debaters, you know. Yeah. They're debaters.
One of the peculiarities of modern physics is it still uses the old Newtonian language. Newton was all visual. Everything was classified, connected, continuous. Modern physics has many troubles with the visual problem and the acoustic problem. And they don't know whether, for example, to have a particle theory or a wave theory of matter. And a particle theory of matter tends to be visual, and a wave theory tends to be kinetic. But modern physics is divided into the different sensory modes of man. And many members of the top physics world are quite unable to understand some of the visual aspects or the non-visual aspects of their own field. They're very good at maintaining the general decorum and the conventional respectability of their clan, but in fact they are divided by severe strife within.
You've got like 5 seconds to raise your hand.
Well, again, we might disagree on open and closed, you see, because I call the ear closed and the eye open, but some people turn it around the other way. It doesn't matter. As long as they're both there, that's what matters.
Yeah.
As long as you have
tell me, can you what do you call the ear closed and the...
Because it's total.
It's like a tribal society is closed. And
I see what you mean.
An open society is the civilized world is open. And whereas the tribal is absolutely closed.
Uh-huh.
Now this is the opposite of what a lot of people think.
Right. Well, I mean, that would explain for you our diverse interpretation of socio, because
you can see that a tribal society is not open. You can't get in. There's no way in. You are not allowed in. But you can get into a civilized society. For example, you can get, by immigration, you can get into Canada. But you cannot get into an African tribe.
No.
By immigration.
You're close.
The God who made a clock-like universe and wound it up and started going, he withdrew, he left, he died a long time ago.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
That is the God that is dead. That is the only one that is being observed. The Newtonian universe.
Going back to the pastoral.
With the advent of the book, the church became a book religion. Whereas today, with the advent of a software electric environment, the church is beginning to mistake the new electric environment for the mystical body itself. As pretending, many priests are so confused that they're merging themselves in this new electric environment as if it were the mystical body.
Yeah, I'm doing a book called The Second God.
Yeah, is there any relation to the first one?
Well, you see, I say the first God created man, and he's been trying to make man moral ever since. And man created the second God, and he's trying to make that moral ever since.
By the way, I have one of my basic things lately has been the discovery that when you're on the telephone or on the air, you don't have a physical body.
Yeah.
When you don't have a physical body, you don't have an identity. When you don't have an identity, you don't have any morals.
Is the old Renaissance book religion versus new software masquerading as mystical body.
We never do anything consciously.
No. Would you say that this North American society is basically optimistic still?
Yes,
and
I would.
European is basically pessimistic?
In a very general term, I would. I mean, the thing is that because I think, and here I'm rather sticking my neck out, but I'm going to say this, and Marshall may disagree with me very strongly, but I'm going to say this, that you over here do believe that the environment that men create governs their nature and their lives. And I don't believe in that. I think that this is only a very small part.
We are of 18th century origin, and it was precisely at that time that Rousseau invented the theory that the environment was the great educator.
That's right, and a lot of loaded rubbish it was. Absolute
However,
rubbish, which has produced the present chaotic situation.
Nature as a teaching machine is now capable of being programmed by human intention.
Yes, but you see, these, in a way, Marshall, that's only just words, isn't
No.
it? I mean, you program it like men, you mean like men program computers. You mean they put in something and then the computer, but you see, that's a non-creative
But it's like programming lighting levels, sound levels, temperature levels.
Yeah, but is this a pleasant idea?
Life,
is this an idea to be welcomed?
This is, well, whether it's welcome or not, my great point that I'm trying to make is that is not life, that's a surface thing. you see. And I think that life's about something much more than that.
It's like saying, though, isn't it, that disease is not just a matter of symptoms. On the other hand, if you can get rid of all the symptoms, who cares what disease is?
You get another. What do you think about the young people who are in this hippie thing? You're one of their favorite people. Are they among your favorite people?
Well, I can't say that I have given them too much cause for comfort, or I haven't done very much besides just observe what sort of form their behavior seems to indicate is behind their life. The automata of the electric age, the software age, are these little softy, long-haired Peter Pans, and they're pure automata. They're simply doing the bidding of the zeitgeist, the new environment. And I can see clearly that they're desirous of a very much more rich social life, involvement.
Well integrated with technology. And so it's a lot less about, putting down your iPhone or laptop at the dinner table, and a lot more about like paying attention to the conversation, right? And I think blaming the technology does a disservice to folks who, maybe could learn more in the context of just manners at dinner.
In social life, and the mere finding of little niches and jobs and so on will not satisfy them.
Aren't they becoming tribalized the way you say the whole world is, and they are actually doing it?
Tribal,
and they even use the word, don't they?
I don't know, but tribal is not a new form exactly. But post-literate tribal is a very different matter from pre-literate tribal. And we're tribalizing simply by virtue of a much closer family, a sense of the human family.
Marsh, I wouldn't presume to dispute it, but what I would say is that if you, as far as I've been able in a very sort of amateur way, to read and think about the various contributions to knowledge which have been produced at different times, the thing that astonishes me about them is the huge area which is the same, which is constant, and how narrow is the area that belongs to particular environmental changes, whether a civilization is in a very stable or advanced state, or whether it's in a chaotic state. There are two questions that you can ask about life, really.
Conversation and mimicry. Yeah, I think that in some way that's too bad, because I watch shows like yours and other shows, but they're dwindling, and you realize how entertaining the simple form of reasonable conversation can be, and I realize that we probably just beat that notion to death. When we were in London, we had.
You can ask the question how, and you can ask the question why. Now, I'm passionately interested in the question why, and I'm not much interested in the question how.
What about
but I think you over here are enormously interested in the question how.
Remember the phrase polite society when that came in? This historically meant a society that established its values on the word or the behavior that was capable of inspection, that would bear looking at. And polite society no longer is with us because we no longer live in a visual culture. And so the values of polite society are for the birds. And I'm not free of the nostalgic look back at some of those old values. On the other hand, I can see why they've gone down the drain, and I can see why new ones are forming right under our noses, and I can see why the new ones create such revulsion, total recoil. We're a highly integral civilization, and this is what distresses people who belong to the old specialist, disintegrated one. They can't find a little place for themselves.
Yes, but are you sure, you see, are you absolutely sure that this is the birth struggle of a new civilization? Oh, yeah. Are you absolutely sure that it's not just the breakup?
No, the circuit is new.
See, that's what I think is perhaps the whole difference between North America and Europe, really, is that you over here do believe that.
Well,
but you do over here.
You have a bigger stake in the old technology.
Well, no, but we're inclined to think that all these things that you imagine to be of such enormous importance, like, for instance, this thing we're doing now on television, because a lot of people goop at television for hours every day, you're inclined to think that's an enormously important thing. And I just think it's a sort of sign of the kind of vacuity that comes. Now, as Marshall does, 200 years ago, printing was invented. Then,
500.
500 years ago, printing was invented. Life's never been the same since then.
No, absolutely true.
I don't agree with that. I think that printing or television, all these things, they affect the surface of man. But the fascination of life, to me, is the exact opposite that I find in Socrates and St. Augustine and St. Paul, all those people who lived before printing.
But not before writing.
Oh, well, if you like.
By the way, there's a wonderful book by Eric Havelock called Preface to Plato, in which he just mentions in passing that what Socrates' great contribution was to the dialectic was the ability to say, would you mind repeating that, please?
That's in them after hour spots, them divided souls, them that's catching the Holy Ghost through the music, minding their own. You know how you just be minding your own business, listening to your music, doing your thing. You know, however you doing it, the in the after hour spots, the love, with the love. You gotta have the love. So I'm sending this shit out to the like the 20-minute
version. This kind, the Socratic irony, the Socratic questioning was a playback. With the coming of writing, the possibility of playback came into human society for the first time. Socrates was very much a product of technology, new technology.
Well, I dance with the speaker till you hear it blow. Then plug in a headphone, cause here it go.
You see, you misunderstood. A sample's just a tactic, a portion of my method, a tool. In fact, it's only of importance when I make it a priority. And what we samples out by the majority. But you a minority in terms of thought.
I'm sending it out to me, and yeah, cause you know I deserve a shout out too. Yeah, send it out to me. Handle it.
You have a more intensive feeling of thinking when you doubt something than when you already agree with it, you see. Our friend, Father Calkins, my friend Jerry Fagan says, the future of the future is the present. But very few people dare look at the present. This was always true. Because almost every idea they possess is wrong. It is almost inevitable that everybody will ignore the ground in which they work.
Characteristics at all. Under electric media, you just have a world trial, probably to be ruled eventually by. The Americans have lost their sense of identity. The country is falling apart physically, and what's happening, of course, the presidency right now is, I think, related to things that have nothing to do with Watergate at all. Namely with the new surround of electric information, which puts that whole hierarchy of rigid, organized, and specialized jobs and functions in great jeopardy. The entire character of a written constitution in the electric age is the thing that fascinates me and rather terrifies me. Because there is nothing in the nature of the written Constitution of the United States that makes it capable of coping with an electric environment of instant information. And politically, because of the speed of information. The American bureaucracy, political and educational, was set up for very slow speeds on the bridge work and railways.
One of the peculiarities of new forms, electric forms of retrieval,
At electric speeds, nothing in the USA makes sense.
things that man had forgotten long ago.
Hidden ground is destroying them. Is looking at the new electric as a body and change the sensibility within it. It will become more European than Europe.
You cannot translate anything into Chinese. Any other culture won't work.
So what we call grammar is entirely a written form imposed on an oral form.
Views on you, that's authoritarian and all that, the bastard. The pusillanimous little scribbler.
I do believe he is a popularizer. I do believe in 5 years we will look back at this book and perhaps shrug our shoulders. I don't think it's of long or lasting influence.
The implications of this will just be absolutely revolutionary. I mean, the magazines and the media and all that took them over. I mean, let me give you an example of the sort of no think, no balls stuff that went on in the 60s. I think it was at the same time that this conference was going on that we all met. Newsweek magazine wanted to do a cover on Marshall. So they invited him to the high church lunch on the top floor and all that kind of stuff. And all the guys, the heads of the departments came in and he had to do his, dog and pony show and things like that. I was there.
This is what Harold Innis taught you all about this. The guys never read Harold Innis.
You won't read this in any book except Understanding Media. Unless you will, Bias Communication. Harold Innis has something on paper.
The movie has become progressively better understood since TV. It has become an art form. It is being given all sorts of special consideration and is even being used as a recruiting center for political talent and other show business.
Well, there's less phone-bugging in this country than there is in France.
Yeah. Well, anyway, see, we're not trying to settle these points. These are incidental illustrations. The main point is somewhere else, eh?
Yeah, but it's important to get a look.
This is the paradox.
I have 3 days left with you.
There's no longer any such thing as secrecy. That's what the joke about the Watergate affair. Everybody.
Bienvenue au système de messagerie vocale de Belle Mobilité.
If you'd like to make a call, please hang up and try again.
My phone was probably bugged, not that I care. Couldn't care less if my phone was bugged.
Well, there's less phone-bugging in this country.
The main point is structural.
Government and press.
The new criticism has brought about a total revolution in reading habits. We now read in depth.
Colossal fiction.
The idea of fakery in the media is a very appealing one. The word fake, actually, and the word fact are the same word. They both come from Latin, facio, meaning to make. Both fakes and facts are things made.
Now, Swift had another point. He says it doesn't matter whether it's true or false. The effect is the same. And any rumor, no matter how crazy, has an effect, an instant effect, which can never be cancelled. And the effect is independent of any truth or falsehood.
Yeah.
Now, Swift had another point. He says it doesn't matter whether it's true or false. The effect is the same. And any rumor, no matter how crazy, has an effect, an instant effect, which can never be cancelled. And the effect is independent of any truth or falsehood.
Yeah.
Now, this is Swift, the great Jonathan Swift.
Yeah.
And he has obviously seen to the heart of the matter. The effect, now you can never measure the effect of falsehood. You can never say that this has now been contradicted, this man has now been vindicated. The fact is, he has suffered, and you can never measure. So you can never fine anybody, you can never repay anybody, and so on.
Yeah.
The damage is done instantly.
If you say war ends today, that is not a point of view. Or if war declared today, that is not a point of view. This is an all-involving situation. Situations are not a point of view. By the way, new journalism is not point of view journalism.
You become an investigator?
No, it's saturation. It's saturation journalism.
What does that mean?
Just total involvement.
And that doesn't involve a point of view?
No.
You
just drag the reader into the situation, you drag him down into the pool.
I never have it.
Well, then you've had it. You've been with the story.
We flip back.
You climb out of the pool eventually.
Well, you have to flip. Where do you go from there? But I would have thought the New York Times would be a paper which wanted to be objective to
That is visual. That is old-fashioned literary.
Right.
The new journalism is totally subjective.
I agree. But when you say that the New York Times is all subjective,
Oh, no, I didn't. I said it is old-fashioned point of view journalism. It's
using point of view as
objectivity.
Physical,
This side you give both sides. That's called objectivity. If you give both sides. But in saturation journalism, they say there are at least 1,000 sides to this case. And we're going to give them all at once. That's involvement. But point of view of journalism says there is this to be said for the Pickering Airport, and there's this to be said against it, and that's supposed to be objectivity. Meantime, the real story is never mentioned.
But these
And the news, what is it the New York Times used to have on the masthead? All the news fit to print? Darn right, it's fit. It's fit to that medium of print. Only now we have news fit to the internet, and news fit to television, and news fit to radio, and so on. And the media fit the battle. But
I.A. Richards used to say at Cambridge, a small poem, a small 8 or 10 line poem, was quite enough for him for a week's intense study and reading. He couldn't read 2 poems in 1 week. And this sort of depth reading and depth analysis and depth consideration of all situations, cultural as well as individual, psychic as well as economic, this multi-leveled awareness, multi-sensuous awareness of all situations is, I think, directly involved in the TV image with its tactile value.
Then you had better stay out of politics.
The gate was originally known as the Watergate.
But how amazing that a Hartman building in Washington should have been called that, and that it should in turn have been applied for Nixon.
The secret agents who are just destroying each other in public because they got fouled up over policies. You see, one's international, one's domestic. And the huge clash in these policies that cut down the budget almost to nothing just enraged these guys. The whole blooming world has become about the size of a little village, 1,000 people or so, where everybody knows everything about everybody.
Let's write that letter to grandchild here, dear.
We are still writing the letter,
Oh.
Dear grandchild, helix culpa. As you know, the voting age used to be 18. It will be 3 in your time. 3 years of age is sufficient now to mature the person and to give him a proper quality of senile grooviness. The word groovy used to mean new, as you know now. It means settled in well-established patterns.
The kids, the awful struggle is the real pressure cooker situation is the kids who are the natural citizens of this electronic world.
sensory commons
are also caught in what Tony calls the pencil box world. So you've got the slowest environment and the fastest people together. Now, so that's why the schools are going to get blown out.
That is called a gap, a generation gap. People need to meditate on the nature of gaps very much, because between a wheel and an axle you have a gap, and without that gap there could be no wheel. When the grease disappears and the gap seizes up, you've got problems. Now, what's wrong with our generation gap is not that there's a gap, but that it is seizing up. It is getting into a hotbox situation.
Your pops ain't came through for
I'm
niggas.
just saying,
He's doing
though.
real bad
I'm
right
just
now.
saying,
We know that.
In which the blooming wheels won't turn. Our ballot boxes are turning into hot boxes. Our ballot boxes are turning into hot boxes. They're hotting up the political situation, trying to get representatives out of that old box. And it's hotting up and seizing up and will not yield representatives, but only freakouts. Only freakouts. They're hotting up the political situation, trying to get representatives out of that old box. And it's hotting up and seizing up,
But this
and
is-
will not yield representatives, but only
This is
freakouts.
now in an information world. Espionage is the biggest business in the world. No stockbroker can run his business without espionage. No banker can run his business without espionage. Every developer has to have espionage.
No.
Every fashion monger has to have espionage about what's coming.
No. That's one of Joyce's
The whole damn world is run by espionage today.
popular points in his
I'm studying the patterns and the effects of these speed-ups.
great work. Who gave you that? No.
Since most of the effects are subliminal,
A name is enough.
very few people know about them.
When you've been labeled, you have been
You can have access to any information in the world, anywhere in the world.
numbed. Numbered. Nom.
I was a network administrator for the NSA. Prior to that, I was an analyst, and before that, I ran tech support for Microsoft Word. Early to that, I worked in various capacities at a KFC in Topeka, and before that, I babysat for my little sister for several summers.
Now, or you are just automatically eased out.
So with politics, the gap between the kid and politician is over.
And never mentioned in the press.
And the gap between the ballot box and the box office is likewise closed.
Apropos, we want to get it done.
We are now standing at the most famous, or should I say, infamous gate in the world.
The ballot box and the gap between the ballot box and the box office is likewise closed.
So the world of espionage, which, after all, in the medieval world, spying and listening and overhearing people was the normal way of life because they had no privacy. In medieval courts, palaces, and villages and so on, there was no privacy. Everybody lived in public all the time, surrounded by servants.
Now that we have an electronic sort of world, we live imaginatively in the old frontier world of, well, horse opera.
Lived in public all the time, surrounded by servants.
Brain-numbingly repetitive. Everyone says Downtown Abbey's pretty good.
It's like taking a Coke ad and turning it into a personal sonnet to one's wife.
And the paper as a happening.
Surrounded by everybody.
Bienvenue au système de messagerie.
Salinger was the great, great hero, and strangely enough, for another group,
Symbolism simply means pulling out the connections between parts of sentences. I write symbolism.
We can take this thing called the radio and put it on this new thing called the internet.
Start. One of your fans, Mr. Golmati from California, asks, where were you the first time you heard one of your songs on the radio?
I was in Canada. I know, so I remember I was in Canada and I was really tired and I was about to go on stage at this outdoor performance. I actually think it was in Winnipeg, which is where I was in Canada. And I'll never forget it. I actually think it was in Winnipeg, which is where Maria Aragon is from that video.
A.A. Milne, so it doesn't have to do with adulthood or maturity necessarily. I believe some of these are fads. However, McLuhan, aside from youngsters who are now involved with Lord of the Rings in the same way, has some interesting things to say. And the fact that Madison Avenue got more involved with him than perhaps academia, and I'm talking about faculty level at academia, I believe is revealing.
Oral people don't have a written form imposed on them. Look, this guy doesn't know what I'm talking about.
I ask you, what is our most cherished right since pioneer days?
Stand back and just analyze instead of experiencing. Looking just beneath the surface.
Now, but he was trying to report Gould's idea of perfect music.
Does that relate to labor? Oh, that is another, it relates to labor. Yeah, but it's a technical point, and to take an easy thing. I know, but it's, we automatically plunged into it. Except the iron law, but it's we showed the eye. Well, the iron law, and then, again, remember, probably nobody here has heard about the iron law wages. So there's no point in banging it to people as if everybody knows about the iron law wages. Yeah. Barry is an encyclopedia who has got tired of nearly everything he ever knew. He doesn't want to let you have it. Well, the iron law wages, the whole question of the iron law wages is another containment theory, where if he'd all commodities alike and exchange everything for everything else, then it doesn't matter where you enter in the system.